Okay, so we have a document about the alternate attendance system in Tokugawa time period in Japan. So let's go through content through documents. How does this document reinforce what we've already learned, and what new information can we learn from this document that we didn't talk about before when learning about the alternate attendance system? Here we go. The alternate attendance system was a device of the Tokugawa shogunate, the government of Japan from 1603 to 1868, a couple hundred years. It was designed to ensure political control by the regime, the leadership, the Tokugawa, the shogun, designed to ensure political control by the regime over the daimyo, or territorial lords, who the lords exercised virtually autonomous authority, total control over more than 260 feudal states into which 4/5 of the country was divided. Okay, so that's some interesting information there. Yes, the Tokugawa shogun technically ruled all of Japan, but 4/5 of the country was out of his direct control. 260 states, each one ruled by a daimyo, a lord, right? So it's the shogun has, quote, authority over those lords, and those lords have authority over the states. So if you're the shogun, you're going to want to have as much authority over those feudal lords, those daimyos, that you can, because then you truly do have the power. So whole thing is set up to have authority over those lords. Under this system, most of the daimyo were they were forced to travel every 2 years from their home domains where they had power to the capital of the Tokugawa shogunate at Edo, present-day Tokyo. Remember, the shogun made the new capital at Edo so he could totally control the city. And the lords had to spend alternate years in person, personal attendance at the shogunal court. So every 2 years, they have to spend time in Edo. Each daimyo was also required to maintain residences at the capital. So they have to have a residence all the time, a house, a complex at the capital all the time. And that's where the lord's wife and children were permanently detained. So that's like we learned before, as the lords go back to their states, their families stayed at Edo, kind of like, and by kind of like, we mean exactly like, a hostage situation. So the shogun had control over the family of the lords. Another important contribution of the operation of the alternate attendance system was to the modernization of Japan, was to promote the intellectual and cultural unification of the country. Okay, so there's a new claim, that the system is going to unify Japan intellectually and culturally. So because of this system, the author is claiming that Japan will become more united in thought. And we know this is true. The Tokugawa shogunate really united all of Japan under a very dominant Japanese culture. It was very, very together, intellectually and culturally. The attendance system served to bring a large part of the leadership elements from the whole country together in one place, and to keep a constant stream of leaders and intellectuals moving back and forth between the capital and all parts of the country. Yes, remember, it's not just the daimyo, the lord, that goes back and forth. The lord brings his samurai, which are highly educated, brings servants. So you have an intense amount of people moving from one state of the country to the capital we get this on biennial every couple of years. We have a very big movement. This was important in giving Japan tremendous intellectual unity for which it faced the West in the 19th century. Yes, Japan was united because when those lords are in the capital of Edo, when those lords live in Edo, they are all sharing knowledge, all sharing intellectual, all sharing culture. All those lords and samurai are absorbing it. And then when the lords go back to their home states, they are now spreading that common culture back across 260 different states of Japan. And you better believe that all those people that lived in those feudal states, when the daimyo came back, you better believe everyone was super excited to learn about what's the Edo culture. What's going on in the capital city? And so if there's something new, if there's new learning, if there's new theater, if there's new education, if there's new ways of doing things, it gets spread every couple years all over Japan. The same Edo culture gets spread. It also enabled the people at large to have a stronger sense of national unity than would have been the case had the system not existed. Yeah, it's just this national capital of Edo is just spreading itself out, and its nationalism and its identity all over Japan. By serving as the vehicle which spread the culture of Edo and Osaka to the countryside, the system influenced the diffusion of a truly national culture. Yes, and one of those things that we see when Japan opens up to the rest of the world, when Japan in 1868, around that time, when Japan looks to all over the world, Japan is so strong in their own understanding of their own culture. They are able to incorporate many different things, such as factories, an education system, the idea of a military navy. They are able to take so much information from Germany, England, the United States, all over, yet still retain an intensely nationalistic, unified Japanese culture. It was an incredibly powerful modernization and westernization. And they were able to do that because when they decided to do that, they were already, because of this one reason of the alternate attendance system, an incredibly strong, powerful culture. All right. That's our content through document. Okay, we've got a document that compares France under Bourbon dynasty, specifically the Palace of Versailles, with the capital of Edo in the Tokugawa shogunate. So let us see what we can learn from the document and then answer some questions on it. So first, content through the document. See what in the document reinforces what we learned. What new information can we learn? Are we going to learn anything new from this? All right, let's take a look at what is this? 1994. Okay, already I'm thinking it's within 30, 40 years. So I'm liking the knowledge. Okay, the historians definitely kind of knew what was going on at this point. Cornell University Press. I like that. It's connected with a college. We'd have to look up William Beek, Louis XIV, and the cities, Edo and Paris, urban life, modern era. Okay, sounds like a good source. Not too many questions on the source in my own mind. In the very heart of Tokyo sits the Imperial Palace. Tokyo was Edo. Site of the former, there you go, Edo Castle. Inside, a colossal moat with ramparts that dwarf anything seen in Europe. Vast open spaces enclosed the last fragments of one of the world's most imposing 17th century, 1600s monuments. Okay, is it really that big? Does it really, or is this hyperbole? Is it just exaggeration? Does it dwarf anything seen in Europe? Is this castle larger than any castle's complexes, not just castle, but the complex around it with moats and walls? Is it larger than anything seen in Europe, or are we just exaggerating? Good question there. Across the globe in France, Louis XIV's palace and gardens of Versailles form a similar impression of artificial mastery of nature and society. Artificial mastery of nature. Impression of artificial. Interesting. A lot of opinions here. This is very flowery language. It's very. There's a lot of claims that I don't see backed up. I mean, I could make the counterclaim that the Versailles was actually a mastery of nature. I mean, they pumped water up a massive hill and then brought it a fairly long distance to actually create water pressure into the fountains. Artificial mastery, the gardens, impression of? No, they actually gardened and took all of nature. They were in control of all of nature around there. I don't know what the author exactly means with that. It's not historical language, and the claim is not one you usually try to back up. This is more, miles of formal gardens, decorated, punctuated, with fountains and statuary surround a palace known for its cold magnificence, with the entire ensemble of town, palace, and park orientating itself around a single central focus point. And that's got to be like Louis himself. Yeah, the Sun King's bedroom. Cold, known for its cold magnificence. This is poetry. This is biased poetry. Each complex symbolizes a system of power. Okay, now we have a historical claim there. Edo brings to mind the Tokugawa rule by status, which decreed that the daimyo lords, who were themselves forced to spend alternate years in Edo, the alternate attendance policy, away from their regional domains, lived administratively and spatially segregated from the various other categories of subjects, all arranged in a pattern of residential sectors spiraling around the castle. Okay, so the daimyos are living around the castle. They have residences. They are spatially away from their regional domains and away from their own personal subjects. Okay, so they're arranged around the Tokugawa, the shogun. Versailles, in similar fashion, indicates yeah, the domestication of the French aristocracy in a, quote, gilded cage where they scramble for favors while the Sun King undermines their authority and deprives them from their independence. Oh, that's a beautiful sentence. It's poetry and not history, although it is true, but it's poetry in a sense. It's well-crafted sentences. Let's take this. Versailles, okay, capital of Paris, similar fashion is going to control the nobles. The domestication of the French aristocracy, the nobles. Domestication we usually use with farm animals, to take a wild, powerful animal from nature, but make them into like a sheep or a cow domesticated on a farm. So it's a simile or a metaphor where Louis is taking the wild nobles who are powerful and a danger, but having them live in the, quote, farm of Versailles, domesticating them, making them like sheep in a, this term that's used quite a few, gilded cage, where you're trapped, but gilded is like covered in gold. So your cage is gold. Your cage is fantastic. Your cage is fun. Your cage is entertaining. You're living in the lap of luxury, but you're still in a cage. And so that's exactly how, in poetic terms, that's exactly how the nobles were in Versailles. They had everything they wanted, all the luxuries, all the fun, all the everything, but they were still trapped, and they were becoming powerless. Where they scrambled for favors, that's true, because the Sun King was his own reality TV show. Everyone tried to compete for his favor, and he had levels of how powerful people were. He had levels of how close, a hierarchy, how favored they were. And if you were low, you were shamed and shunned. And if you were high, everyone respected you. Undermine their authority and deprive them of their independence. Exactly. Took away their power, and they were not independents, for they lived in Versailles. This is reinforcing what we knew. I don't think there's no new knowledge. It's just what we knew said in kind of poetic languages, quite frankly. So it's just what we know. Okay, today we've got a map of the Eastern Hemisphere, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, circa day around 1750. Okay, so let's get some content through the documents. What do we see here that we've already learned, and what can we learn new from this map? All right, so look at our key, 1750. Look at the source. Yeah, history of Europe. Okay, so it's a map. And then look at our key. We've got everything that is sort of pinkish is Spanish territory. Everything that's sort of purplish is Dutch territory. Horizontal lines is Portuguese. Slanty to the left is French territory. Slanted lines to the right is British territory. So everything else is dotted, which means not included in this. It could be autonomous, could be local empires. Okay, could be uninhabited, like the Sahara Desert. So first thing we see, let's look for our empires in 1750. Well, there's the Chinese. I don't know if we'd classify it as an empire, but it's China. It's the dynasty, and so there's China. China is isolated roughly in 1750 from trade. Japan is isolated in a closed country policy. The Russian Empire going across the north, not mentioned on this map. The Russian Empire. We have a couple African cities in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is not mentioned, nor is the Mughal Empire in India mentioned, and there would be cities there. There's independent kingdoms in West Africa and South Africa, so we see a lot that is not mentioned. Indigenous tribes in Australia, not colonized by the Europeans yet, so indigenous tribes in Australia and New Zealand. So a couple things we notice. We notice that the Western European countries are creating trading ports on the coastline of Africa and Asia. So we see trading ports on the coastline. Nothing in the center of Africa, nothing in the center into Asia or China or Japan. Okay. We see territories claimed. So we see territories claimed on the coast, which we would imagine would be facilitating trade. Everything in the 1750s is all about how can the Western European countries make money. And one of the ways is to actually start aggrandizing and getting territories. we see the East Indies, basically Southeast Asia, was seriously colonized by the Dutch and the Spanish. We see the slanted up left, we see the French come in a little bit to India. They are later going to be supplanted and taken over by the British territories, which start right up here, but the British territories are going to soon take over all of India. And that's about all we get from this map historically. Let's make a note down here, the Cape of Good Hope, Cape Province, the Dutch territory. This was 100% not necessarily trade, but settlement, okay? Literally hundreds of Dutch families had been settling in this area. They are later going to become the white South Africans, okay? So going back to 1750 and even 100 years before, we see the Dutch settling to actually live, become farmers and become colonists and make communities, because it's their new, not trading posts, but new home. So that's different than other places.